Chapter 1. A Preface to Solitude. What is this, and where are we? Dressed in a black suit and tie, my father stands in the fourth row from the top. His hair, prompted by a dab of Brill cream, lies slicked back to reveal a broad forehead, a physiological feature that my father claimed denoted intelligence. Through his glasses, he looks toward the camera and, as instructed, obediently focuses on the photographer's raised arm. 3 rows from the front, in the center, my mother, distinguished by a necklace brought along for such an occasion, smiles expectantly, and, holding the sign, with a CHA Cromer 1952, I sit cross-legged on the first row. Note my wristwatch. Unlike the assembled company, my watch's hands indicating the very hour and minute of this portrait elude the camera's gaze. Most particularly, they ignore the photographer's directive to keep still. Out of focus, they tick on and on in order to summon the revisions attending the future. For the years to come, the 60 or so guests at the Abbeville Guest House in Cromer, a seaside resort on the Norfolk coast, will no longer readily gather shoulder nuzzling shoulder. Never again will these people draw close to form a community. Much will shift, alter, change, slip away, flee, or disappear. The collective will dissipate. For better or worse, a more solitary life awaits many who are there. Cromer, 1952. The group photograph, always taken at the beginning of each week, is a remnant of a period in which some still clung to the ideal of comradeship and therefore chose to spend their annual break at centres run by the Cooperative Holiday Association, the CHA. This is an organization begun in 1893 when the Reverend Thomas Arthur Leonard, a nonconformist minister from Lancashire, offered working-class people an affordable holiday that, he trusted, would give them respite from the strains of industrial and urban life. On these occasions, through a program of communal walking, living, and social activities, he promoted a spirit of friendship and fellowship. He envisaged a recess that would be rational and protect his holidaymakers from the frivolities and artificial pleasures of places like Blackpool, a popular Lancashire seaside resort which, in his words, tempted one to loiter on the sands all day and at night stew in some suffocating place of amusement. By the summer of 1952, some 60 years later, when my family booked a 2-week break in Cromer, Leonard's efforts had expanded. There were now a considerable number of CHA guest houses throughout Britain. Abbeville had been added in 1950. Furthermore, as can happen, the clientele had become increasingly middle class. In spite of these developments, however, the ideals of the organization's beginnings lived on, and so did its relative affordability. I believe we paid £4 each per week. No small consideration for my father, whose salary was £500 a year. What principally endured was the CHA's collective, shared structure. Sleeping was in same-sex dormitories. There were no accommodations for married couples, and children bunked together. In this spirit, I was assigned to a large room with the other juveniles and adolescents, a ritual initially replete with mystery, for I slept and dressed among complete strangers. As one can see, Cromer attracted older as well as younger guests, the single and the married. The CHA promoted equality, therefore discrimination based on age, gender, class, marital status, as well as race, nominally had no place. All activities were communal, even the rudimentary bathrooms. We kept to the same schedule. We all arose in response to a bell that rang promptly at 7:45 a.m. We ate together. In 1952, rationing was still in place, so we each brought our ration books, and we jointly participated in the arranged excursions. Furthermore, we collectively took part in the evening gatherings designed to weld the house party into a group of friends, irrespective of class, creed, or age. The rule of lights out at 10:30 p.m. made it impossible for anyone to slip out at the front door and stew in the night's artificial pleasures. Moreover, if I remember correctly, we were responsible for tidying our areas, making our beds, hanging up our clothes, and polishing our shoes. On Sundays, I believe, the men washed up the pots and pans. A few memories of these 2 weeks in Cromer linger. A windy ramble along the lofty cliffs, a knotty bend in a forest path, a chilly, hesitant dip into the sea, rigorous games of ping-pong, as well as segments from a dramatic sketch based upon Lewis Carroll's classic. I played the role of Alice. Strange to say, among the most vivid of these recollections is a brief, unexpected glimpse of the aged Queen Mary, a spectre of Edwardian aristocracy, decorously erect in the back of her Rolls Royce. A uniformed chauffeur was driving the Queen away from Sandringham. One of the CHA daily excursions had taken us to the grounds of this royal Norfolk residence. When the limousine happened to pass where I stood, this apparition of upper-class privilege momentarily thrilled me. Like many of my generation, no matter how much I was surrounded by socialist principles, I was also devoted to the royal family and kept scrapbooks containing newspaper clippings of their photographs. My mother's blurred snapshot struggles to lend credence to the moment. Except for a white-gloved hand, ceremoniously, perhaps obligingly, raised so as to wave from behind the limousine's tightly shut window, Queen Mary is invisible. She died the following year. Even though most of the guests relished the pleasures of community, there was the occasional irritation with the holiday's regimented schedule. Following World War II, the deregulation of many aspects of ordinary life and an increasing freedom of choice contributed to a growing impatience with a number of the organization's rules and directives. Indeed, complaints about the obligatory nature of the programs and excursions had already gained enough momentum that by 1951, a CHA subcommittee had met to consider the issue. One guest was said to remark that, unless you were dying, you went out on the scheduled walks. No excuses. Another grumbled that the leaders were forgetful of the fact that the guests are on holiday. If I remember correctly, however, a majority of guests at Abbeville blithely subscribed to the older ways and willingly agreed to adhere to the prepared program. I particularly loved the exhilaration of darting in and out of clusters of people. I enjoyed the attention. and I relished the outings that took me to places beyond the ken of my childhood. My family did not have a car. And, as far as I could tell, most lodgers were certainly not bothered by a warning from an earlier brochure that bookings for these holidays are only accepted on the understanding that guests will participate in excursions and in the full social life of the centre. Nor were they upset with the threat that guests who ignore this and who seek their entertainment outside the house are not desired and would not be booked on future occasions. As holidays always do, these 2 weeks in Cromer all too soon came to an end. The visitors scattered, the years rambled, occasionally scurried on. Memories of the Norfolk seaside town, like a receding tide, drew back, leaving traces of their pleasures. Just as the lines left by the pebbles in a retreating sea lose their definition, to be buried among porous granules of sand and obliterated by the rushing water, thoughts of the C.H. holiday in Cromer soon vanished. More pressing matters replaced them. A few months after the CHA group photograph was taken, my parents informed me that we were emigrating to the United States. One afternoon in early February 1953, we boarded the QE2 and, as I feared, left England for good. I can still feel the deep, dark, shattering blast of the departing ocean liner's deafening horn. A decade later, in my early 20s, I had adjusted to a new life, perhaps not always entirely persuasively, for I crossed my fingers behind my back, away from the officiating gaze of the local DAR membership, when, in an old Virginia courthouse, I ceremoniously renounced my allegiance to another land and became an American citizen. Throughout adulthood, a nagging longing for what I had left behind tugged at my sleeve. But mercifully, my studies and research interests periodically shepherded me back to the landscape of my youth. As a result, most recently, from September 2019 until the beginning of March 2020, I spent half a year at the University of Cambridge, a destination familiar to me because of previous residences as a visiting scholar. During this 6-month residence in Cambridge, although very much immersed in what I had come to research, I intermittently felt an overwhelming need to get away and take a break from my long hours in the Cambridge University Library. When this impulse swept over me, my thoughts occasionally drifted back to memories of Cromer in 1952, and by extension to other seaside towns unfamiliar to me within reach of Cambridge and along the East Anglia coast. Nostalgia for another time did not lead me to these destinations, but a desire simply to get away for a while, to be free from my usual constraints, and to embrace whatever might come my way. As a result, whenever the weather permitted, I honored my inclination to leave my desk and took the train to these seaside towns. But this time, long separated from a summer's warmth and the convivial community assembled on the Abbeville guest house steps, I returned to the North Sea alone and in a colder, darker season. As a result, throughout the autumnal and winter months, I not only travelled to Cromer, but also to Great Yarmouth, Felixstowe, Lowestoft and Southwold. These solitary explorations of the East Anglia coast even now stalk my waking hours. Down to the seaside again paints a picture of the landscape and communities through which I wandered between September 2019 and March 2020. The book gathers together a series of vibrant, personal impressions that capture the complex and conflicting character of the seaside towns to which the train took me. The book documents my experiences and thoughts while walking through these coastal areas during seasons when such resorts are normally shut and only a chance figure wanders on the sands. The past is never far away, for woven into the book's fabric are details borrowed from a location's history. So too are references to a town's cultural heritage, to its literary figures, painters and musicians. The result is an unsettling narrative that paints a portrait of once popular seaside areas that are now simultaneously not only sources of natural beauty and enchantment, but also sad reminders of loss, destruction, and neglect.